I am sure that you are all familiar with the images on the screen. As you see similar images of the Middle East on CNN, NBC, BBC, Al Jazeera every day. I would like, however, to try to paint a different picture of the Middle East, one that you are less familiar with, but one that is just as real. But first, I would like to tell you a little bit about my own personal journey. Though I am an Israeli, I was born in the US, and I lived there until I was 22. I am a Zionist. That is, I am a Jew who believes that Israel is the homeland of the Jewish people. This is a picture of me as a young Zionist activist handing US President Ford a petition condemning the UN for its actions against Zionism in 1975. People often ask me why I moved to Israel. I moved to Israel because I believe the state of Israel is the child of the Jewish people. If I want Israel to become the kind of country that is an expression of Jewish values, that is a light unto the nation, I could not remain a spectator in the US. I needed to join the game. So in 1978, I packed my bags and moved to Israel. My dream was to be a member of a kibbutz, a communal farming village in the desert. And so I moved to Kibbutz Keturah, located in the southern Arava, just north of Eilat, on the border with Jordan. At the time, the kibbutz was 5 years old and had 30 members. Today, we have 400 residents. But the early days were tough, as the Arava Valley is a hyper-arid climate with 45-degree weather centigrade in the summer and 2.5 millimeters of rainwater annually. After serving in the Israeli army, I began my career on Kibbutz Keturah as a farmer. I was put in charge of irrigation and had the opportunity to literally make the desert bloom. Those were the days. Though I quickly became immersed in kibbutz life, which included various positions on the kibbutz, marriage, raising 3 daughters, I never forgot why I had moved to Israel. Throughout my years in Israel, and despite the isolation of living in a small village in the desert hundreds of kilometers from the center of Israel's political, economic, and social life, I tried to have an impact on the country's foreign and social policies. I have tried to influence Israel towards the path of peace and reconciliation with our Palestinian neighbors and our Arab citizens. Though I am a Zionist, I recognize that the land of Israel is the shared homeland of both the Palestinians and the Jews. I believe that the solution, any solution which does not accept the rights of both Palestinians and Israelis to live freely, democratically, securely, and with dignity, is not a sustainable one. I also recognized that the conflict between Jews and Arabs in the Middle East, in the end, is detrimental to the very land that we are fighting over. The ongoing conflict between peoples in the region is the main excuse for the short-term thinking of all governments in the region and the environmental degradation that short-term thinking always entails. A question for you. Annually, more people die in Israel from terrorist attacks on civilians, war, respiratory disease related to air pollution, or traffic accidents. Okay? Can we have the poll start? Can we have the results? Okay, very good. A clever group. A lot cleverer than the team yesterday because because you got the answer right. Okay. The answer is C. The deaths caused by wars, terrorism, and even traffic accidents are more immediate and more likely to be reported by the media and receive government attention. The long-term impact of our disregard for the environment can be just as deadly. There is a direct connection between the environmental degradation and the ongoing struggle between Arabs and Jews in the region. We need a new paradigm. We need to reframe the Middle East from conflict conciliation. As an Israeli citizen, I have sought a variety of outlets for public involvement and impact on the direction of the State of Israel, including many years as an active member in the Israeli Labor Party, an active member of the peace movement in Israel, and I was a founder of the Israeli Green Movement Party. However, after years of trying to help move Israel towards a more progressive and peaceful foreign policy and a more equitable and sustainable social policy, I was frustrated by the lack of progress and the political stalemate. Peace seemed to be further away than ever. In 2001, I found myself at the crossroads both personally and professionally. I had been working successfully as a business consultant. However, I found I had no passion for the work. I really wanted to throw myself completely into the issues that I was most passionate about, peace and the environment. Then I heard that the Arava Institute for Environmental Studies was looking for an executive director. The Arava Institute for Environmental Studies was founded in 1996 by Professor Alon Tal and Miriam Sharton on Kibbutz Keturah as the Middle East's premier academic and research center, bringing Jews and Arabs together, Israelis, Palestinians, Jordanians, and international students in order to teach that nature knows no borders. Now, when the program began in 1996, we thought we'd bring a bunch of Jews and Arabs, throw them into a room together, teach them about the environment, because maybe that's something they could agree on, and they would talk about all the rest of that stuff in their room, in the dining room, sort of informally. And we found, however, that students could spend a semester or a year just smiling at each other and not saying what they really think. Or, alternatively, it would come out, but in a not very constructive way. In fact, an early on party, a disagreement over music ended with a cassette player being thrown on the floor and destroyed. So we realized that we needed to address the loaded issues directly, creating a seminar, which includes outside speakers, Arab and Jewish facilitators, student-run programs, and field trips. We talk about the things that the students don't want to talk about. We talk about history, politics, religion, war, terrorism, occupation. Now, since this is the Middle East, these sessions are not very quiet. They often end with students screaming and yelling at each other, slamming the door, stomping back to the campus. However, as angry as the students are at each other after a dialogue session, they all have to go back to the same small campus where students are living together, sharing textbooks, coffee, tea, space. The Arava Institute is located in the middle of the desert, in the middle of nowheres, so they really have no other place to go. And the students quickly learn that they don't have to agree, but they do have to get along. The students do not always enjoy these sessions, and we often have to drag them kicking and screaming to attend. But in the end, they always tell us that it was the most important thing that they did while they were studying at the Arava Institute. I applied for the position of executive director of the Arava Institute and was appointed on September 1st, 2001. By then, the Intifada al-Aqsa, the second Palestinian uprising, had been going on for a year. 11 days after I was appointed to my new position, I watched in horror on the TV, along with the rest of the world, as the World Trade Centers came down in New York City. This was an extremely difficult time for anyone who believed in peace and reconciliation between Jews and Arabs. No one was interested in talking about peace, while violence between Israelis and Palestinians was ongoing. The Arava Institute did survive those difficult years and the many military engagements that followed. How is it that the Arava Institute manages to sustain itself and not collapse under these circumstances? The Arava Institute is based on mutual concern for all residents of the region, for the natural environment. In our part of the world, no matter what your political point of view, you cannot deny the need to protect the environment and therefore the exigency to work together to do so. We breathe the same air, we drink the same water, we share the same ecosystems. Let me ask you another question. What is the scarcest resource in the Middle East? Is it water, open space, biodiversity, or trust? All right, start the poll. You have the results? You were right. These are exceptional students. Yes, water is a very scarce resource in the Middle East, but it is my contention, and in fact I really have no way of measuring that it is in fact trust that is the scarcest resource, and I'm going to say something about this critical scarce resource in a minute. It is almost a given that every year there will be a military conflict, a military flare-up somewhere in the Middle East. When the cycle of violence returns to the region, our students and programs are not immune. Students do not check their opinions and loyalties at the door when they enter the institute. They bring all of their beliefs and passions with them. What is unique about the Arava Institute is that unlike everywhere else in the Middle East, a military conflict does not mute dialogue, but it sparks it. For example, the 2008 war in Gaza began on a Saturday morning. Our students generally leave the institute for the weekend, and so most had gone to their respective homes in Jordan, Israel, and Palestine. By Sunday morning, after a week of Palestinian rocket fire, Israel was deep into the invasion of Gaza. And I thought to myself that it was probably the end of the program. The Jordanian students would not be able to return across the border. The Palestinian students would probably be prohibited from returning to Israel by the Israeli army. And half of the Israeli students would be drafted, the male students, for reserve duty. But despite my gloomy predictions, by that afternoon, all of the students had returned. The Jordanians all came back. We were lucky that none of our Israeli students were drafted. And one of our professors, Dr. Tariq Abu Hamid, got in his car, drove 4 hours to Jerusalem to pick up the Palestinians at the Bethlehem checkpost. By Sunday night, the second night of the war in Gaza, all of the students had returned to the institute. The staff, however, realized that we could not simply go back to teaching how to protect lizards and how to share water while Israelis and Palestinians were shooting at each other just 300 kilometers away. We decided that we needed to convene all the students in the classroom that evening. So 50 students and staff crowded into the classroom, sitting in a large circle. You could have cut the tension with a knife. And there I sat in the middle of the circle without a clue of what to say. So finally, I leaned back and I said, "Does anybody have anything to say?" It was like I'd opened up a dam. The Palestinians jumped up and pointed their fingers at the Israelis, screaming, "You're causing a Holocaust on our people." And the Israelis jumped up and screamed back at the Palestinians, "Where were you last week when the bombs were falling on the Jewish village of Sderot?" The evening went on with more yelling and screaming, but by the end, they were all hugging and kissing and with tears in their eyes. They all decided that the next day they would hold a peace vigil calling for an end to all violence in the region. Now, I was not surprised by the outcome and expected that they would find a way to come together. I think what is surprising and exceptional about the Arava Institute is on the second night of the war in Gaza, there was one place in the Middle East where Jews and Arabs were sitting in the same room screaming at each other. They weren't shooting at each other. They weren't firing missiles at each other. They weren't throwing rocks. They were using their words. This can only happen when people trust each other. And trust is the scarcest resource in the Middle East, maybe in the world. We make peace with our enemies, not with our friends. We make peace face to face, not over the internet. We make peace by opening ourselves up and taking a risk, not by hiding behind flags and guns. If you want to make a difference, make a friend from an enemy. It starts with trust. At the Arava Institute, we have created an oasis of trust in the Middle East. I invite all of you to consider joining us at the Arava Institute as a student or an intern. Help to further cross-border understanding through studies and research. Help us take down the walls of hate and build the bridges of cooperation. Bring the message that nature knows no borders to your home community and show the world that people in conflict can work together to build a better, more sustainable, and more peaceful planet Earth. Come and help us light up the world with hope and trust. Let us all be a light unto the nations. Thank you.